just so cute. I love Joel.
I'm a big Joel fan. Canada loves you. Your house guests love you. Did a great job.
It's okay to be a little weird because we all have our weird quirks and stuff. And
Joel's the best. Joel, you're the winner, and I will shout loudest. Don't you worry.
Joel's a really smart guy.
Let's hear it, please, for Joel.
What's up, everybody? This is Joel from Big Brother Canada, season number 4. So, it's been a few weeks since BB Can 6 has come to an end, and I am very pleased to welcome another special guest to the podcast of Random Thoughts. Please, everybody, it's Maddy Poplett. Maddy, how's it going?
Hello, I'm good. How are you, Joel?
I'm doing really awesome, thanks. I am very excited to have you on. I really enjoyed your game, and I'm awesome. Realizing more and more that me and you had a lot of similarities while we were in the house. So the first one is that we are fellow 5th place finishers. Yay to us, fellow 5th place finishers. So
exciting. It ain't easy. So congratulations.
It's pretty much the greatest honor ever because you're like you come so close and you're like there's a point where you're like you have it but you don't.
Yeah,
and then you walk
fun.
away with a few smiles and some people wanting selfies with you. It's pretty much the bomb.
And I was happy to walk out to an audience too, being like the last after the eviction and everything. It was cool to experience that as well, a little silver lining.
Yeah, that's true too. And I had the luxury of being sort of in front of an audience, not only when I walked out, but also being in front of an audience because the sideshow was still going on in Big Brother Canada at that time. So I got to meet a former house guest as well, Bruno, beforehand as well. So yeah,
cool.
it was
That's
pretty
awesome.
cool. So let's get into your before you actually make it into the house, because like I said, not only were we both 5th place finishers, wishful thinking, first place, maybe all stars, we'll see. But so. Preseason, you talked about how you weren't really that much of a fan, at least from the get-go of the show Big Brother. You said, in fact, this is another similarity me and you have, is that I got into the show following season 14, and I'm kind of ashamed to say this. I got into the show because one of my favorite Survivor contestants is Russell from Survivor Samoa and Heroes Villains, but. Mm-hmm. His brother was supposed to be on, and I was like, wow, if he's anything like Russell himself, this is going to be a good season. Now, of course, he didn't pan out to be all that great, but one of the characters that I loved from that season was Ian, who ended up winning the show. I could really connect with Ian in so many ways, and I was like, man, this guy has a lot of similarities to me. I could probably do really well at this game. And then I binge watched it for from season 1 to season 13. I binge watched it. So you were also season 14 got you into the show, right?
Yes, I watched one episode, and to be honest, I was skeptical. Mm-hmm. I grew up watching Survivor, as most of us do. And I always said, even as a kid, I would love to be on Survivor just without the surviving. Forget a scorpion. I'm not into that. But then when I watched one episode of Big Brother that someone sat me down and forced me to watch, it was something clicked. I was like, oh, this is everything. I love this so much. So ever since then, it was just my world revolved around it. I caught the end of season 14. I watched Ian win, was still kind of getting a feel for what the game was and the religion that it was going to eventually become to me. And then it just progressed and it manifested itself into an even stronger love every time I watched a new season. It was awesome.
Now, one of the other things that we have a little bit in common is that we've tried out for the show multiple times. I believe this was your 5th time trying out for the show. Yeah. So it's interesting because I made it on my 3rd try. So nice. For yourself, 5th time auditioning, was there a point where you were just kind of like, it's probably not going to happen? Because some people try out every year and don't even make it past the cuts.
Nope. I knew eventually it was going to happen. And I know that sounds of course you don't know, but when you kind of have a feeling of, maybe it's time to not try anymore. never personally experienced that feeling. I think that there was never a season where I would have been ready until now. And casting is amazing. They can sense those things in you, right? So they get it. So I think when I walked in, I did the Montreal open call obviously for this season. And I kind of walked into there saying, I think that this is going to happen for me. And it was, I guess, maybe that translated. And I knew myself well enough to carry myself in the open call audition. And so it actually worked out, and I just shot straight through. I had never gotten a semifinals call back before. I had never gotten any of that, but every step that went along and having it be a positive reception, I felt better and better. And then, as we learned, it worked out.
So did you, in any of your past tryouts, for myself personally, I had a feeling it was going to happen after season 3 because I had made it all the way to the finals in season 2 and same thing in season 3, and I was like, okay, now there's going to come a time where it's going to happen. Had you been like always cut first round, or did you make it like past a couple of stages? Oh, so you were literally like didn't even make it through the door at all until season 6.
I got one email that had been like showing interest in an online application. And said, we'd love to see you on an open call. And that season I didn't hear anything either. So I had only gotten just like a little hint of an interest before, but I had never gotten a full callback. I had never gotten any communication outside of that. So when I got called for semis after my Montreal call, I was in downtown Montreal traffic going home, and I saw the number on my like Bluetooth screen, I guess, in the car, and I was like, holy shit, like this is it. I know what this is. Like I knew it. And then from that point onward, every time a random number that wasn't in my contacts came up on my phone, I'd have a little heart attack. And we're here.
Absolutely. Last question before we actually get into your time in the house. Given the fact that you were yourself had worked in the service industry for quite a long time, do you think you were able to incorporate some of those skills just with the fact that you got to be doing a lot of things at once and sort of having your head on a swivel when you're in that business, but you also work under some pretty intense pressure. Did you use any of those skills or try to remember some of those things when you went into the house?
Okay, so kind of a funny story. It's a good question. Because I've been so obsessed with the idea of getting on the show so long, I tried to incorporate the skill set I already had in the service industry to my benefit should I one day make it in the house. So I would go home and think back to myself, everything that my customers had to eat and drink that night, every night before bed. So I knew things like memorization, where it was going to be no problem for me in the house. I knew that multitasking and kind of focusing on separate things at the same time was just something that, fortunately for me, was easier. I would have thought that the social aspects of it would translate a little bit more into the house, which it didn't sometimes. It also teaches you to let go of a day's stress once the day is done, which I think was beneficial in the house to a point, but also not as much sometimes. Like, I think I should have probably been a little bit more like wary of different situations going forward. Anyways, so it helped and it hindered a little bit, but mostly helped, I'd say.
So let's get into your game now. So week number
why
why not? There's lots of weeks to tackle, and we don't want to have this go on for 4 or 5 hours or so, which it could potentially when you've been in the house as long as you have, or as long as I was as well, we could probably be talking about it for weeks and weeks on end.
Yes.
To be
honest. How
honest,
many days were you in?
70 days, which it was the maximum
70.
that you guys were in there for. So
Wow.
I was a week shy of getting to the end. So
wow. I was only 62. That's kindergarten stuff compared to 70. Every day is a lifetime at that point in the game.
Yeah, you know what? It doesn't seem like a lot, 8 days compared to yourself and me, but when you think in Big Brother terms, you got to think differently, right? You got to think like hour equals another forever, a day equals a week, week equals a month, and so on and so forth. So yeah, when you put it in Big Brother circles, it is considerably longer. So
it is. And I'm not sarcastic when I say that. The fact that you had 8 extra days is oh my god, to me that's wild how much extra time that is.
Yeah, for sure. So week number 1, the big thing that happened with you in week number 1, I believe it was you that got the goblet originally, right? Before you passed it off to Andrew. Obviously, this was completely unbeknownst to you. So I want to know from you, Had you kept that goblet that you had in your hand, who would you have put in hell and why?
Oh, that's such a tough question to answer, especially because now I know everyone.
Right.
So to pretend it's really hard to get back into like the unbiased headspace that you're in on night one. Honestly, I probably would have handled it similarly to Andrew. Ryan had commented in the house that he would just have put most of the boys in hell because then they would have coped better with their like lack of items, which would have been smart. I wasn't thinking that clearly. I think I would have just, I made a connection with a handful of people right away, so they would have definitely been in heaven. So Paris and Will, I actually liked Andrew, so I think that Andrew probably would have stayed in heaven too. When it comes to people who I would have put in hell, again, it's so hard to say, but anyone who I felt like either were going to be threatening in ways that I could not personally be threatening, and then other people that I just unfortunately wouldn't have had a chance to make a connection with. I was in the last group to walk in, so I had even less time than most to socialize, so that would have probably played into it as well. I feel like my group of people I would have kept out of hell because I could have said, hey, well, we walked in together, like maybe there's something we can do here.
Yeah, so I actually think it's pretty obvious, not just from the edit that we showed on the show, that you and Paris and Will had a really close connection from the very beginning. So I get that. Let me phrase it to you another way then. Was there anybody, you talked about you would go after threats, so when you walked into the house, and maybe this can kind of answer the hell question indirectly in a way, is was there one or two people that stood out for you that you were like, wow, these people, we got to watch out for them, whether it's from a strategic point of view, they're too smart, or they're too big and strong, we got to get them out now? Was there one or two people that were kind of on your radar in a suspicious way?
Not necessarily suspicious, but I recognized that I was going to have a hard time being on the level of somebody like Erica. Like, she was amazing that first day. She came out socially, like obviously capable. She was clearly showing herself as wanting to be the leader from the get-go, which is something to me is very bold. So I would have kind of been like, okay, that's a lot, and you are so beautiful and so confident already. Why don't we just at least get you to a level where I have a moment to figure you out? And I feel like maybe that's why. I don't want to say it's because I didn't like her, because I absolutely did. It's just like, from a confidence perspective, she was intimidating, absolutely intimidating. And she remained that way to me for the whole time she was in the house. I loved Hamza at first, but I did feel like there was something almost sinister about him and sneaky, which ended up being very true, I guess, altogether. So I think that's somebody as well that I would have considered. It's all such a blur. It's hard to say, but Erica and Ham stand out as two very big impressions on me that first day.
But sadly, you were unfortunately put in hell, which means you kind of had to fight for your life right away. And from all accounts, from what I heard from some other people, is you guys literally had almost like zero time to really talk or integrate with anybody before that HOH competition. So with that being said, were you going into that like, man, I'd better win this?
No, I had no interest in winning the first HOH.
So you felt pretty good. You felt like you were okay with any of those people who won HOH. You felt none of them would put you up?
Not necessarily. I just felt like that was a more workable situation to me than designating myself as somebody who could win a competition. I also walked into the backyard, looked at the competition, and went, well, I'm not going to win this. Like, I don't have the skill set for this. So should it have been something I might have been able to win, perhaps I would have kind of waited, similar to what Johnny, Will, and Paris did, and kind of looked and sized each other up and said, okay, maybe. But knowing that I wasn't going to be physically capable of winning, plus understanding that socially and like I could have talked I was more confident in my ability to talk through it than to succeed in the competition itself.
So you don't win HOH. Johnny takes the HOH, puts up Rosina and Ali. Seems for the most part, we get obviously Andrew and Hamza seemingly like campaigning the hardest to keep Rosina in the house and get Ali out. But I'm assuming from your standpoint, was it a pretty straightforward vote for Rosina?
Well, Johnny didn't put me on the block, and as much as it's a frustrating thing to hear as a fan, I was just going to do what was the most seamless way through the week for me. I'm not making any waves at this point. I'm
Yeah.
still trying to observe and collect as much information socially as I can. So if that means I have to go with the house and vote out Rosie, that's what I have to do. I do great. It was not the best choice. We probably should have kept her, but it wasn't up to me, and I wasn't about to make waves. So I'll let you go, Rosie. Love ya.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think that's something that a lot of times gets missed. Of course, when you're a fan watching it, you want to see the big move every single time. But when you're playing,
All the
you got to switch that off a little bit, and you got to be like, as much as it sucks for the fans watching sometimes it's about like, sometimes making the safe and easy move is the best way, because you got to think long term.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're there to win, you got to think long term about like what's smart
Exactly.
right now. So with that being said, after surviving being put in hell, were you kind of hoping to lay low and quiet? Because it seemed like for the next couple of weeks you were always in a good spot, but you also weren't necessarily talked about a lot, which is a good thing. Was that kind of what you were hoping?
Yes, I was actually hoping that I wouldn't even really make the edit for like a lot of episodes, because that means that you're doing something right.
Right.
I did raise a little bit more eyebrows than I had even thought I had deserved. I haven't watched the edit yet, unfortunately, but I feel like that did have to do with Paris deflecting a little bit of the attention that was on her to me, which, like, good on her, I guess. So I was just trying to stay out of the way, continue observing, and make genuine connections with people in the meantime.
I want to know, because I spoke with Paris yesterday. Paris told me that your relationship, and it's interesting because it wasn't really shown on the show as you guys being such a tight alliance until quite later on in the game. So you guys had formed that on day 2, I believe is what Paris said.
Yeah.
So at that stage, when it's day 2 and you guys decide to team up, from your standpoint, is it just kind of like, well, of course I'm going to say yes right now because I'll say yes to anything? Or was it actually like you had a really good vibe and you were like, I think I can go deep with these guys?
It's absolutely, the answer is yes to both. I told myself coming into the house, which is something I adhered to, especially at the beginning, and I did lose track of it towards the end, was that I was going to be adaptable and I was going to trust my gut. My gut instinct for both Will and Paris was positive, and I also thought, hey, shit, if they want to align with me, sounds good. Like, let's go for it, especially because I felt good with them as well. I was the only one who really understood what Will was saying for like the first week and a half. So I just kind of walked around as his translator because I lived in Newfoundland before. Okay. So I was like, oh, I understand him. So I feel like he felt positively towards me for that reason in itself.
So if you were in Final 2 with Will, would you have helped translate for him when he was trying to give his speech, or would you have like thrown it on the back burner and been like, guys, he's not even talking anything. He's just speaking gibberish, guys.
I definitely wouldn't have helped him, that's for sure. Sorry, William, but no, you're on your own.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with him sometime soon about this, and I want to almost like I wish there was like a subtitles thing somewhere where I could put something in there, but I don't think there's a subtitle for like
they'll figure it out
for East Coast lingo or whatever. But I'll have to do some research on that. But okay, let's get to week number 2. A very, very revealing and kind of almost over the line brutal HOH with some of the questions. We have those. You're a fan of Survivor. You know they have those all the time where it's like, who doesn't deserve it, and everyone's feelings get hurt. But some of these, like who would be most likely to go to somebody's funeral? Like, what was going through your mind with some of these? Were you just kind of like, when you were being asked these, I guess, and had to answer them, were you like, whoa, I don't know what to say to this one? Like,
again, what I should have done should have been to go the strategic route, and I only thought of it afterwards. Because 2 things. So we did that HOH on day 6, and I believe we filled out the survey on day 3. So I was kind of thinking as I filled out the survey, do you remember in season 5 when they gave the have-not cookies, like supposedly anonymously, and then they went and showed everyone what happened?
Yeah, last season.
I was kind of phrasing my answers just in case it came out kind of thing. But then what I actually should have done was write the same person for all the answers so I could better predict if it was to be a competition, what the answer might be. Anyways, so it felt poisonous to do it in the first place. It felt like you were getting yourself into a trap. And then when we actually do the HOH competition, it's friggin' brutal because you're like, well, do I answer truthfully? Do I throw? Do I this? And at that point, of course, I wasn't interested in winning HOH yet. So I thought, and this is a real statement, I thought that when I dumped the water on myself to say that I would cry if I got nominated, that I was throwing it with a crappy answer. But then flash forward to the rest of the damn game, crying every day about everything. Very funny that that's what ended up happening. Because in my real life, I swear I'm not that emotional at all. But whatever, it's okay. It's a funny joke now.
Yeah, you know what? In your defense, and kudos to you for like taking it with a grain of salt. In your defense, the amount of pressure that you're under in there, like I will admit I cry more than most guys do, but at the same time, there was like things get the best of you, and sometimes you're almost you feel like a little kid in there because something as simple as like you not doing well in a silly game where there's nothing at stake, like a have-not game, or even if it's like one of those Hasbro board games, I could see myself like crying and getting upset just because of the situation because I couldn't like do a catchphrase right. So that's just me.
I think part of what it was, too, is that preseason, I put an extreme amount of pressure on myself, and I knew that I had the capabilities to be successful to some extent in this game, and the money was not for me. It was like it was going to go to family, right? So for a combination of the pressure and the expectations I had on myself, plus like a higher purpose to the prize itself, kept my emotions always on the surface. And I also thought it was probably healthier to let it out most of the time, because then I could sort of be conclusive on my emotion about something and move forward. So I think mental health wise, although it's probably not what it came across, I was actually doing a little bit better than most because I wasn't harboring as much under the surface as other people were.
So Ryan is HOH. He puts up Andrew and Hamza. You talked, I guess, when you talked earlier about how Hamza, there was something about Hamza that you felt wasn't quite right. So with that being said, was there an inkling in your mind that maybe it's not the right move to get rid of Andrew?
Honestly, as I spoke to Hamza more and more, I did start to kind of get it. And I have a bunch of coworkers from Lebanon as well, so I understand and kind of can get my head around the confidence aspect. So I think it just took me a few extra conversations after day one to understand what Hamza is all about. So when it came down to considering Hamza or Andrew, regardless of the fact that Andrew was making waves in the house that people didn't enjoy, I actually saw potential in a relationship with Hamza in the game because I thought, okay, I actually get him, and I don't know if most people do. So I was hoping that Hamza would stay.
And he does stay. Andrew is evicted unanimously. So then week number 3, Hamza takes home the HOH. I guess since you just said all of that, you were feeling fairly comfortable with Hamza as HOH, that there wasn't a way you're going up?
That was my most comfortable week in the house, was when Hamza was HOH.
Okay. Interesting. And so he puts up Jesse and Liv. It seems like fairly straightforward. Well, I guess maybe not necessarily, simply because there was sort of a bit of the Paris aspect of this whole thing, because you, Paris, and Will had made your alliance since day number 2. Obviously, it was shown on the show quite a bit, Jesse and Paris being super tight. So was there any sort of influence from Paris to try to get you to keep Jesse in the house?
Yes, but she did a good job kind of making it seem for the greater good and not necessarily for her own benefit. I saw benefits to keeping both, to be honest. I was definitely pro-Liv going home, as I understood that she was interested in me leaving the house as well, but she had also made some pretty good arguments towards keeping her because we had a similar kind of sensible mindset towards the game. So keeping Liv in the end had to do with, first of all, I was a little bit sketched out by how much Paris wanted to keep Jesse, and the fact that could maybe have built a bridge for Liv and I, which again I didn't take. No, that was a mistake. But anyways, yeah. So it was okay for me for Jesse to leave.
Well, okay. Well, then Jesse leaves. Liv is still in the house, and then the big thing that comes next is the infamous rogue vote, which we find out was cast by Veronica. Why was it? And this is kind of. Ryan was going over this with me when I talked to him, and he was talking about, well, it's not that big of a deal. So why was it a big deal to so many people when it was really just, it was still a pretty lopsided vote? one way. So why was that one vote still like such a contentious thing?
It annoyed me personally because I think there was some skepticism of whether or not I'd want to evict Liv. So the fact that it could have potentially been twisted into me doing it was annoying. So that was my personal frustration with it. Otherwise, honestly, I was ready to move on from it as well. It wasn't the hugest deal. But when people find something is a big deal and they're stressed out about it, and I know that I'm not the source of it, to me, that's a deflection tactic as well. Oh, yes, I'm also very upset about this vote. Why don't we talk about this for the 100th time again? Sounds good to me. Because if it's not about me in a bad way, it's all good.
Yeah, and me and you know, I think, better than a lot of people that when you're in there, we quite often make a mountain out of a molehill, so to speak. So everything is pretty, everything in there is a big deal, even from somebody not putting a dish in the dishwasher, or, you know, like, we can go on and on and on. Yeah, you can go on and on about that. So week number 4, Erica takes home the HOH. Now, from your perspective, you and Erica, you talked about how you were kind of threatened by Erica. Like, I think a lot of people were from the very beginning. So where did did you guys always kind of have a rocky relationship? Or was it just kind of like, I guess, how should I say this? Was it always kind of like something where your just personalities didn't mesh? Or was there something that you guys didn't get along? Or were you both kind of suspicious of each other? Or what was it that you guys never seemed to get on the same wavelength?
I think suspicious of each other is the best way to phrase. I did enjoy her as a person. Like, I had nothing against her. I love that she's strong and she's opinionated and she really believes in herself. I feel like I relate to those things as well. I think we just didn't see eye to eye, and I think there was something, like, maybe she felt this way about me. I definitely felt this way about her. I felt like we would always be competing for the same sort of respect in a social situation, whereas I tend to take the defensive approach to wanting to be the hub of the social network, where she takes the offensive approach. But I still think we could kind of smell it in each other that at home in our life, we are that big person. But I was willing to sit back and let her take the heat. So I think that she saw that I was always suspicious of her, and that's why she decided to initially target me and her HOH. But obviously we know plans changed and all that stuff. Right.
So what that perfectly leads me to my next point, which is Maren and yourself are the ones nominated that week. So before the Power of Veto competition happens, you talked about her targeting you. So I can assume then, from your standpoint, you were probably thinking like, man, I had better win this veto or find a way to not be sitting on that block on eviction. Otherwise, I am done. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And Paris did tell me the night that I was nominated, after all was said and done, that there was going to be a backdoor plan in place to get Veronica out. So that was in the back of my mind. But you know how it is in that house. You don't feel safe at any point, regardless. And then you're put on the block, so you feel even more sort of threatened. So I was definitely going into that veto being like, I'm going to win. And then it was spinning, which is like my least favorite thing. I am such... Like, I can't even go on a swing set. Like, I'm a nausea person. So whenever I saw the ropes, I was like, oh, shit. Like, this is going to suck. But anyways, you saw it. You watched. It was,
Yeah, well, in your defense, again, and I'm not just coming to your defense because we've experienced the same thing, but, like, who likes getting dizzy? Who likes spinning around and stuff? Do people ever just like, let's just like run around in a circle for like 10 hours? This sounds like a great way to have fun.
Some people get on rides that spin, which mind boggles me. Like, I was just at Wonderland and I'm like, I have no interest in that. That's going to ruin my day. And also, the ropes are tight on you. So when you kind of like retch, because I was on the verge of puking all over myself that entire time. So when you retch, the ropes keep your stomach in that like tightened position, so you can't like unpuke. It's the worst.
Unpuke.
Anyway.
So I mean, the more and more you're sort of describing this, the more I'm like, man, this is so brutal. And like, vertigo and cutting off your circulation seems like just a lose-lose for just about everybody.
And it's exhausting. And I made a mistake. I don't know. I haven't seen the edit, but I screwed it up at one point, and I had to like double back and fix something. And I was like, oh, this is like the last thing I want to be doing. And then I made it within like clutch seconds on that first round, which is exciting.
So Erica wins the power of veto. On a scale of 1 to 10
usual.
at that point, as usual, it's not the first time we're going to talk about Erica being a comp winner, of course. But on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like not surprised at all, 10 being like jaw-dropping shocked. You talked about how there was a bit of a backdoor, but you could never be for sure in Big Brother Canada. When Erica says, I'd like to use the veto on Maddy, puts the veto necklace on you. How shocked are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
So 1 is not shocked?
1 is like, meh, whatever. 10 is like, OMG.
Honestly, a 2. Paris told me, and I know that does not translate. I was like, I'm going to have to cry. I'm going to have to be surprised. I'm going to have to go, Erica, thank you so much. You're amazing. Like, I knew that was going to have to happen. But Paris was pretty sure, and I went up to her the night before because I had a conversation with Erica, and she was like, expect me not to use it. And I was like, shit, is she actually not going to use it? So I went from a 1, which was very sure she was going to use it based on the information I had been told in the house, to a 2, being like, ooh, maybe she won't. So then I had to, oh my God, thank you so much, and walk around all surprised and blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't 100% sure because you never are, but I was quite sure that she wasn't going to miss the opportunity to solidify herself as a power player. And more so than anything else, I trusted Erica's need to be that person in the house. And that's why I thought that she was going to use it more than anything.
Did that change your guys' relationship either from just a personal level or from a game level at all? Or were you still kind of like, whatever?
I think that it improved her perception of me because I was able to play in to the like, oh, Erica, thank you. And oh, Erica, why don't we do this together? And I do think that we got to know each other on a personal and game level a lot, strangely, when I was nominated because we were forced into having more conversations. So I think that for me to kind of position herself as a potential little henchman for her was beneficial. I don't think she ever stopped being suspicious of me, and I don't know how successful I actually was. I was looking for blood. I was like, girl, no, you stressed me out, and you are the biggest target in this house, and you need to get out of here. It did not matter to me if she used a veto. She could have done anything, and I would have been like, girl, bye, if I had a chance. But it opened a door that was closed before once I was nominated. So then we were able, she voiced more to me at that point than ever before. She voiced some skepticism about Allie. She connected with me on a gameplay level before or afterwards more than she had earlier in the game.
So you make it through that week. Veronica is out. We get to a double eviction right away, something you guys had talked about quite a bit, which you always kind of do when you're in there. You're always speculating about what's to come next, and it rarely does. But in your guys'
there's
cases,
16 house guests. You just do the math. You know that there's going to have to be those things.
Absolutely. So then double eviction comes around. Liv wins the head of household. Were you thinking to yourself, there's a good chance I might be going right back up on that block and going home?
Yep. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, that's fun. I'll be pre-jury. Great.
So
like that, when I see that Olivia wins, I was like, great.
So I guess my question then is, afterwards, Paris told me that she was campaigning for you to get off the block, but she said it was a much more subtle way than the way Johnny had campaigned. And we didn't really see so much of a relationship with yourself and Johnny at that point. So did you think that Johnny would go to bat? Were you surprised how much Johnny went to bat with you at that point?
I wasn't surprised that Johnny went to bat. I was surprised at how strongly Johnny had put his foot down. And Johnny was voicing, please come work with Olivia and I, please, please, please. At that point, I hadn't had an awareness of how close he was to Paris and Will as well. So had I decided to do that, I'm not really sure how that would have affected me because maybe he would have tattled. Maybe he actually genuinely did want to work with me. I'm not sure. So the fact that he put his foot down that strongly made me go, okay, there must be some legitimacy to what Johnny's saying. And then I chickened out and never did it. But anyway.
So
mistake number 101.
When you found out about that, though, it didn't really seem to, at least from what I was watching on the show, it didn't really seem to like bring you guys any closer together at all, which it typically sometimes does. Did we miss something? Were you still like, did that make you like, wow, I'm so indebted to you, Johnny? Or were you just kind of like, well, thanks, but I'm tighter with other people?
I guess a combination of both. It helped us. We game talked a lot more after that, but I feel like I was waiting for him to voice to me, as like to my face, his desire to work with me, whereas both of us were so hesitant in our one-on-one conversations to actually lock that down. I think I probably should have made the move to do that with him first, but I was intimidated because I knew that he was close with Liv and that Liv and Allie wanted me out. So it was tough for me to put myself out there. I felt like it was too risky. But it improved our relationship. I just don't think to the extent that it would have been included in the edit, because it was a very subtle, like hesitant sort of interaction for days and days and days.
So Hamza is evicted. We get to week number 5. Shocker of all shockers. Erica is the head of household yet again.
And I get second place in another competition. Yay!
Yay!
Again.
And not to open up old wounds, but it's not the first time you'll come in second in a competition down the road.
Not.
Let's leave it.
It's a theme.
I'll just leave it at that. We'll get to that when we touch upon it. So Erica's head of household. Yeah. Are you thinking to yourself that like she's probably just gonna do the same thing again and put you up, or do you think that her using the veto might have like helped your guy, at least how you stood with her from last week?
Well, I certainly didn't feel comfortable with her as HOH, but I also thought, well, tough to say, because I knew that she had made a big banger of her first HOH week, so I assumed that she'd want to be a little more subtle and a little safer with her second go, especially because it had been so soon after. I mean, Liv was HOH for like 20 minutes and then jumps in Erica again. So I thought, I didn't know if she considered targeting me the safe route. I was nervous if she had decided that I was the safe route.
Right. So her idea of a safe route is putting up Marin and Ryan. Now, was that like, it didn't really matter to you either way who went home between Marin and Ryan, or was it sort of a really tough one for you?
No, I really actually wanted, and I loved Marin in the house, but I wanted Marin to leave because I knew that there was only 1 week where I would have probably survived the block instead of Marin, and that was the week prior whenever we were on the block together. Marin was the safe, easy-to-beat person, especially because he was first out in that mental HOH, and I was second place in that mental HOH. I thought that if I was to become the perpetual pawn, the only time that would be good for me is if Marin was gone, because Marin was the perfect pawn at that point, and I wanted him to be out of the way to kind of give myself a little bit more of a cushion. I did want Ryan out of the game sooner than later, because I thought that he was a similar player to me. He had a lot of the suspicions, and I thought that maybe people would start to associate us a little bit too much. But for me, the priority that week was Marin, so I was not happy to see him go at all. I loved having him in the house, but from a strategic point of view, it was, in my opinion, better for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of the first split votes that we have, not only at that point, but throughout most of the season. Your guys' votes were either unanimous or pretty lopsided one way or the other. So week number 6 comes around. Kayla takes home the head of household. Your name is thrown out. Oh, what was that?
Shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
It does. It's the week in the house.
Yeah. Well, because
this is where I start to just turn my game into a garbage fire again and again. It's so bad. Anyways.
So this was kind of, I'm assuming from that reaction then that you kind of assumed this was kind of the turning point of your game. Is that right? And
in a lot of ways, yes.
Okay. Do you think
I backed myself into a corner that I could not escape in this week?
Oh, okay. Well, let's get into it then. So, Kayla is the head of household. She's talking about nominating you. So, maybe take the lead from here. Tell us how you kind of got yourself in this position where Kayla seems to want to get you out of the house.
Well, it was actually because of Ryan. Ryan beat me to the HOH room, essentially, and he let her know that I had suggested to him to switch his targets from Allie to Kayla and Derek, because the house consensus kind of was Kayla and Derek are sketchy. Allie was planning this big blindside on Ryan, and when Ryan and Marin were on the block together, my priority was Marin. So I thought, okay, what can Ryan do to stay another week? And then if he wins HOH and targets Kayla and Derek, I could care less. It's not me on the block. And then if Kayla and Derek win HOH and hear that he's talking shit about them, hopefully they put Ryan on the block. So overall, I just kind of was trying to tread water even more. But then Ryan gets into HOH and tells Kayla that I was the like mastermind behind this whole plan to get them out, which is not fair in a way. I did say those things, and I fully had that conversation with Ryan, which I lied through my teeth about for like weeks after. But I didn't hold his hand into these rooms and tell him to say things about Kayla and Derek. Like, he made that choice. But it was fair of him to jump into the room and say that. So then I had to just damage control after. Like, literally, I was annoying myself with the amount of crocodile tears. Like, it was a friggin' disaster. I don't even think I'm going to be able to watch those episodes. It was brutal.
It's interesting, though, that you talk about this and sort of getting yourself in the corner, because I was looking at it, like, from a little bit of a different perspective, and I'm obviously, like, very analytical in how I'm watching every single player play, and I think that kind of comes with when you've played before, but I was looking at it as, like, yeah, your name is coming up a lot, and that's never a good thing when your name is coming up, but on the flip side of things, Johnny, obviously, the week before that, really went to bat with you, perhaps more so than he really needed to, and then this week, we see Paris really going to town for you, kind of making a last-minute plea, which ends up working.
After she threw my name out.
Right. So, but I guess the flip side of that, and maybe a little bit of a positive, is the fact that two people really campaigned hard to keep you in there. So was there almost like a, wow, I at least, maybe I'm not in good with everybody, but there's some people who are like, who feel like ride or dies, because I feel when you're that intent to want to keep somebody, that really, like, sort of that has to feel good and make you have a certain level of trust with somebody like that.
Yes, definitely. And it also kind of made me feel like, even though at that point I had done 100 things wrong, at least a couple things were coming in clutch at the right moment that I was like, okay, fine, I guess I've figured that out. And when I talk about the corner, I had to continue lying to Kayla and Derek, but at the same time, my relationship with Kayla and Derek that week, in my opinion, became a lot more workable, because had they decided, okay, well, we believe you, to whatever degree they actually did is up to them, but we thought, okay, maybe we can move forward together. And as much as I had voiced in the house, no, it wasn't a big deal to me, it wasn't a big deal, I thought it was a sweet deal. I was like, well, as much as I can't ever really deviate from this now, I've, drawn my line in the sand. If Kayla and Derek are pro Maddy, that's not bad for me, because they're starting to emerge as a pretty powerful force in the house. So if I could shield myself with the showmans, and I couldn't win anything, I was figuring that out real quick. So it seemed like they were going to be able to win things. If I can be a part of the winning side, then why don't I? And then along with Paris and Johnny, I had to lie to Paris about my intentions with Ryan's conversation. I'm sure she's found out that by now, but whatever. Okay. And so it was a corner that eventually came to bite me, but it wasn't the worst thing ever either. So, I can't believe I made it through that.
So did you not getting nominated then, that give you sort of, because you and Paris especially were tight pretty much from the get-go, but when that happened where Paris went to town, is that sort of a moment that clicked, like, it's not just like somebody I'm really tight with, now it's like I'm with you all the way? Or did you always kind of have that relationship with Paris that you were going to go all the way?
I always did. She had me wrapped around her finger. I love that girl, and it's interesting because, like you saw in my pre-interviews, like, I thought it was going to be so cold and callous and not care about these humans. And I'm like, I already have lots of friends. I don't need new ones. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the case at all. They're the only thing in your existence, in your world, right? So I was so much more loyal, so much more just like willing to ride or die than I thought I would. And that Paris only pulled me in deeper that week, but I was already way in there.
So Ryan is put up next to Will. You were able to not touch the block. Ryan is miraculously saved by Canada.
When I saw that envelope in Arissa's hand, I was like, here we go. This is not going to be good. Like, Ryan's staying and everybody knows I'm a liar. In Canada, they hate me. No.
But I guess potentially the good thing from your perspective at this point, I would assume, is that, Ryan is saved from what seemed like eviction, but then Erica is put up. So I gotta assume from your perspective, you're just like, you know what, this is fine with me. I'll take this. Thumbs up to that, right?
Love having her around, and she's great. And we had become very, like, I felt I had great conversations with her on a personal level. But when I heard Erica was going up, I was jealous because I couldn't do it. But I was like, peace out, Erica. See you later. Because this makes my chances of winning this game a hell of a lot higher with you out of here. And she was sensational, and I cannot wait to watch her because I'm going to love her as a character on the show. But when it comes, like you said, we have this in common. When you're in this house, every decision is a $100,000 decision. And it was not tough to say I'd like to vote to evict Erica, please.
Well, I gotta say, from just like that moment when she's put up and then the eviction and the back and forth shouting, I thought I'd been in the middle of some pretty intense conversations during my season.
Yeah.
That alone, I think, like blew any of the arguments we had our whole season. Just that eviction thing, I was like, whoa.
And like, you have a moment that's like kind of like existential as such a big fan. Standing in the Big Brother house living room watching that type of like confrontation, and I'm all of a sudden imagining what it's like to watch it on TV, but I'm standing there and I'm just like, oh, this is so cool, like as if I'm part of this right now. So that never went away. It was unreal, and she deserved to be angry, like all of it. Like, yes, Erica, I liked that exit.
I didn't mind it either. I thought it was, some people took it as like a sour grapes thing. I was just like, well, you know what? Like, it was raw, it was real, it was something we don't like. Enough of the phoniness about like the hugs and thanks, good game and things like that. Like, I didn't have a problem with it at all, personally.
No, she was pissed. She had the right to be pissed. She was about to win.
Yeah.
Like,
So week 7 comes around after Erica leaves. Derek, head of household. I guess assuming since Kayla didn't put you up at the last minute last week, you were probably feeling pretty good. Like if not Paris and Will win, then Derek might be the next ideal one for you. Yeah.
Big time.
So my question for that week is that Johnny seemed to be the person really on the hot seat throughout it, and I was breaking it down, and I've asked this to a few house guests as well, the fact that Johnny is put up next to Ryan, but Johnny's in a tight spot because he's got to not only appeal to yourself, Maddy, he essentially needs a unanimous vote, in my opinion, to get that. If he gets a split vote, it's not going to be enough simply because Derek and Kayla are kind of like the last sort of decisions on this one. So, why did you guys ever, like yourself, Paris and Will, did you guys ever think to yourself when Johnny's doing this campaigning that maybe he's saying the same stuff to Allie and Liv, and maybe you guys should compare notes? Let's see. Yeah.
Yes. But I never, and this is actually, I think, I have two biggest regrets, and this is one thing, and it seems minor, but I wish at some point during this week, because I swear I was thinking it, I wish I would turn to a camera and said, if we think we're saving Johnny, and if Allie and Liv think they're saving Johnny, don't you think that Johnny might be telling us both the same thing? Like, to me, it was very clear. But because Paris and Will were very like, oh my God, we're making this move. Like, we've never had a chance to make a move before. Look at us making this move. Johnny's our boy. Johnny's this. So I couldn't really chime in and be like, guys, let's take a time out for a second. Let's ask ourselves, why do you think this is? Because I couldn't do it because it was an ego situation as well. So I was just like, fine. Honestly, Johnny is better for my game, especially because Ryan had stayed. Because the urgency for me, for Ryan to be out of there, because he knew more than anybody else how much I had manipulated people that week that I was almost on the block. So to me, I was like, get Ryan out this damn door. Like, I don't care what everyone thinks. Get him out. So that's how I felt about Johnny staying. Regardless of if people thought they had made the move or not, I was just fine that he was staying.
So what was anything, the other thing we heard a lot about that week is speculation about a triple coming up and that Johnny could be like a good person to have in the triple, and especially since you guys were going to save him at that point. How much did that factor into you guys, like the speculation of a potential triple? How much did that factor into you guys keeping him?
I thought that when it came down to having to choose, the only person that Johnny would for sure keep safe, two people, would be Olivia and Will, speaking about a triple. However, I thought he would also see it from a competitive perspective and understand that when you come down to thinking of who you might beat when you're going to take two people out, that he would fully focus on the showmance. He would consider Allie from a social perspective, and that would leave Olivia with nobody but Johnny. Like, I knew that with Johnny in the mix, our chances, myself and Paris and Will, were going to be good going into a triple eviction. So that was even further incentive to have Johnny around.
So we get to the next week. Of course, as fate would have it, Johnny wins the head of household, and predictably, like you said, he puts up Derek and Kayla. Derek takes the veto. Now, I got a feeling that you probably, the three of you, felt pretty good with the fact that you were not going to even get put up as a replacement for Johnny, or is that not the case?
I mean, you never, especially as the weeks get less, like, closer and closer to the end, feeling good would be a strong statement. I felt reasonably sort of okay, I guess. I mean, it's hard to say. I thought that there were bigger fish to fry than us. And like I said just a moment ago, he understood that his ability to beat us was, like, awesome. Like, take out the people you can't beat first, right? And that is the week that was the Shaw veto on day 50, and that is my biggest I try not to reflect on things because I can't change them, but I have dreams about that veto competition. I was so close to winning, and I made such a humongous mistake every round of that competition because I was finished, with the exception of the first round and the last round, I was finished my board within like a third of the time of everybody else. So I had made myself a huge mental threat without being able to threaten anyone. It was such a garbage thing to do strategically, and then Derek ends up winning. So I knew that was the start of the end for me, and I was going to have to really scrape the walls, like climbing out of the hole I had dug for myself. And as we saw, that wasn't.
Yeah, but in fairness, I think everybody, even the people that win that I've talked to, have certain regrets about, like, oh man, if I only had taken this, then my resume, I'd look like the greatest player of all time. I know for myself, I don't have too many regrets, but there's like a few near the end were some competitions where I was like one chip away from potentially like winning a veto competition that could have like changed the fate of myself and everyone else in my alliance. So it kind of comes with the territory. You always people
like, clearly I'm not over it because I'm dreaming about it. Yeah. But in my conscious existence, I don't dwell on it too much. But you're absolutely right.
But you know what? It's honest. Perhaps the biggest cliche people say usually is, "Well, I have absolutely no regrets." Well, I still do. 2 years later, I still have some regrets, and I probably am always going to have regrets. That doesn't mean I like dwell on it 24/7, but there's some things I wish I could have like changed. There always is, in my opinion. So, so we get Johnny's HOH. He puts up Derek and Kayla. Derek wins veto. Allie goes up in Derek's spot. You, Paris, and Will are kind of the people that hold the power in this situation. Was it really sort of an 11th hour decision with you guys whispering and talking back and forth? Or were you guys kind of leaning towards one way and then something happened before that eviction? Or why the whispering?
Okay, this was the most frustrating handful of days in the entire house for me. It was even more frustrating than my eviction week, which we'll get to. I could not handle how flip-floppy it was. For 90% of the week, and I will admit that I did flip-flop, especially for like the duration of an evening. I had a conversation with Allie in the catacombs. This was after I basically told her, girl, you're not getting my vote, stop wasting my time. This was after, because she tried again and she did a great job. I thought maybe it's sensible to keep Allie, and I made the mistake of voicing that to Paris. I should have just kept that to myself and slept on it and then talked about it. And then by the time I woke up in the morning, I thought, no, I think what's best for me is to keep Kayla. So for 90% of that duration, I was saying, I'm keeping Kayla. And every time I had a chance to voice it, I would say, I want to keep Kayla. And then the two of them would go back and forth and back and forth. And I think Will was more on the line of, I want to keep Allie as often as I wanted to keep Kayla. So then Paris was running around. This was a very revealing week for me with my relationship with Paris. And it kind of made me realize that I needed to jump ship, because she clearly had connections with with Kayla and Allie beyond what I had understood. They were like, and the fact that this was such a hard decision for her made me realize that I had been putting all my eggs in Paris's basket and not enough in other people's. So I knew that past this triple, should I survive, I needed to do whatever I could to make sure I was staying. So Paris flip-flopping and Will flip-flopping and all this was an 11th hour decision. When we were whispering on the couches, when they were whispering on the couches and called me over, and Paris says, I think we should evict Kayla. And I looked at her and I said, I'm voting to evict Allie. And I don't think that means that I told them what to do in any way. I just told them what I was doing. And at that point, if they had decided to keep keep Allie, and I was on the wrong side. At that point, I just wanted to move forward and figure it out and try to win the HOH because it was friggin' frustrating, that whole situation.
So Allie ends up leaving once again. Some very intense words from Allie as she leaves the house. We get into, as predicted, what you guys had called for a long time, the triple eviction. Derek is the HOH, puts up Liv, yourself, and Johnny. Were you thinking I want to know from yourself, because when I was breaking this down before the triple eviction came, I was like, well, Johnny can't compete in the HOH, so Derek is probably the odds-on favorite, just given the track record, to win. So I wasn't shocked. I wasn't shocked that he had won the HOH, but the catch with a triple eviction is that the HOH can't compete in the veto. So I was like, well, then Johnny's probably going to win the veto. So were you almost thinking in a weird sense that Derek winning could almost be bad, because then Johnny's probably going to be the odds-on favorite to win the veto? And then if Johnny wins veto, where do you stand?
Honestly, it's tough to say. I was just, I don't know, like I wanted to just take it one step at a time. I thought that with Allie gone, that was one. And we spoke about it in jury, and she claims that that wasn't the case. But in my mind, I just could not trust that I was her first choice for collateral damage. If she was to say, hey, I won't put you up initially, I'm like, that's fine, because collateral damage, you want me out and I want you out. That's just how it's going to go. So when you consider Johnny as a probably winner, I thought that just maybe there was some sort of deal I could make with him, some sort of something based on our relationship, and he had tried to save me so many times. I just thought my favorable edge was with Allie not being around, especially because that's one less person for Johnny to be more loyal to, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so if Johnny takes himself off, I'm assuming it's probably either Will or Maddy that is or you're already up. Either Will or Paris that goes up on the block. So do you think that you're still going to get do you think you're still going to get saved in that situation, or do you think you're gone?
I don't even know. It really depends. It depends on what I could say. It depends on if it's aggressive, if it's a blow up, if it's a this. I would have sold my soul to whoever I needed to make it happen. It's tough because it's fun to analyze the variables as a viewer, but when it comes down for me, like having that experience in the house, it's really hard to say what I would think happened, especially because I spoke to all these people in jury and we've gone through all those scenarios together. I don't know. I'm just glad the way it turned out in the end.
So you make it through that week. I think no surprise to anybody that you were saved over both Liv and Johnny at that stage. Seemed pretty straightforward at that point, especially since your main alliance was sort of the people that held the power at that point. So you make it through. Yeah. You're at Final 5.
This is where I needed to win.
And you know what?
This is where I needed to win.
And you know what? I can relate to you in another way, because this is where my alliance needed to win. It brought back a lot of not so good memories for me, because not only was the competition the previously on Big Brother Canada one, the same one that the three of us lost in that Final 5, but it was also the week that I went out of the house, so I was just like, I don't know. And then you lose it on a number of all things. Were you guys just thinking, like, the three of you just like, man, we can't even like buy a competition at this point? Like, what was the three?
Cassandra's dad has a better comp record than I do. So yeah, that weighed, and I knew I was going to go home. I knew it. I thought, I'm going to have to do so much, like, I knew I was jumping ship, like I said, and should I have won HOH, I had some decisions to make of who I was keeping and who I wasn't, and I was fully open to anything. I was going to sit in the HOH and speak candidly to everyone, and probably put Kayla and Derek up just to not make waves at first, but consider every option with who would potentially go home. Again, that's things that don't happen, so I don't speculate too heavily. But I knew that if there was an HOH for me to win and change my game into a mediocre game to a winning game, it was that point, and I wasn't able to pull it off. In addition, I had, already performed so well in that Shaw veto. Like, I was second place in yet another mental competition. So, like, I knew it was just bad, bad, bad all the way through.
So Kayla is the HOH, but one of the things that happened was yourself and Paris came up with sort of a plan to try and get Kayla to cut Derek, because Kayla was obviously very vocal about it. Were you actually, in your head at that point, were you thinking like there's actually a chance, or were you just kind of like, well, I got to throw something at the wall, maybe something will stick? Was that kind of your objective? Maybe.
I did. I agreed with her. It was too early to cut him. But there was kind of an edge that did make sense that I thought maybe it would stick. Like you said, all the spaghetti on the wall, sometimes the noodle stays. So I was hoping for that. Derek and I were comparable in our performance competition, or in our mental competition performance. We were comparable. And I was already like, Will and Paris are choosing each other. Derek and Kayla are choosing each other. Where am I? So I thought maybe my best bet was to compare Derek and I's performance in mental competitions in an appealing way to her and say, you can beat me in physical competitions. You have beaten me. You've beaten me in a mental competition as well. But Derek beats me in everything. So wouldn't it be best to link arms with me instead? It's an easier run for you. It's this and that. But we didn't have the trust that she and Derek had. We didn't have the relationship. So I knew it was a hollow pitch. And if I were her, I absolutely would not have cut Derek at Final Five. So I get it, but you got to do what you got to do. And that conversation was like 2 hours long, and it was just stupid.
Well, you talked about, I want to rewind just a little bit, because you talked about how a couple of weeks before that things seemed to kind of crumble for you. So when you were heading into that Final Five, even before Kayla had gotten power, so after you survived the triple, were you thinking that there was a situation where you could win the game still at that point?
Yes, but I needed to win Final Five, and I needed to hustle, and I needed to make some very direct, bold, and controversial decisions based on how I felt the jury would perceive them. So this is the point where all of my pre-bio stuff would have come in. This was a turn off the emotions, turn it off. What is going to win me this game? And I knew with Final Five HOH that was the moment I had to do that. I was prepared moving forward, hoping that I would survive the triple, because, like I said, all the flip-flopping for Paris and Will, I thought, shit, like their relationships are so much stronger with the other people than I thought. I've been naive, I've been blind, and too loyal. So I knew that in order to curry favor with the jury, I had to do something. I don't know what it would have been, because there are variables like veto and everything in between, but I would have had to make sure whoever I sent home in that HOH week would go in and say, I mean, I didn't expect this of her, and I didn't think that she had it in her. But I didn't do that.
So you and Paris are nominated, but there's Will, the X Factor, who can kind of change the whole thing if he wins the veto. So how frustrating was it from your guys' perspective? Not before, not when he threw it, but I want to talk about like when you guys found out that he'd gone in there and sworn on his son and wanted to like maintain safety. Did you guys just look at him and are like, what the hell, dude?
Okay, well, this is like post-dramatic existential crisis fight, which I had completely shut off, and I was laughing, like I was starting to laugh during the conversation with them. Later on, like, and as you understand, Big Brother hours are different than regular people hours. I had manifested it into, holy shit, maybe I did do this to them. Maybe I am this crappy person. But as we're having that conversation, I'm sitting there going, this is the stupidest thing I've ever been a part of. I can't believe that I have to sit through this right now. I can't believe it. I was like, I'm going to be burned at the stake as a witch for counting to 5. That's what's going to happen. And I thought of all the garbage mistakes I had made earlier in the game. This is what's going to be. I literally had to spell it out with pieces of pasta to be like, if the non-nominated trio member wins the veto and uses it, the only other possible replacement, because there's 5 people, Derek. It wasn't this crazy master scheme. I wish I could take credit for some kind of conspiracy theory. It wasn't. It's just there's 5 damn people. And the fact that they threw that out after they were angry at me and Derek and Kayla hadn't taken the time to think about it yet, I think they could have capably reached that conclusion. They just hadn't bothered to think that far. They thought, oh my God, she is so smart. She's got to go. And I was like, honestly, after all this is what it's going to be. So then as we're in the veto competition and Will has sworn and all this whatever garbage, he's standing there, and Derek says, you're guaranteed Final Four if you drop, man. I wanted to stand up and say, dude, if you win, you're guaranteed Final Four too. That's what happens when you win the veto in Final Five. But I was already catching so much heat for drawing a reasonable conclusion that it would have been even scarier and even spookier if I had actually laid out the fact at that opinion. Plus, like, if Will had dropped and Kayla and Derek had won the veto, Kayla and or Derek, I thought maybe there would have been some wiggle room left. You know, it's not over till it's over sort of thing. So I wish now that I would have been more explicit with screaming, but.
But I still personally think that even though Will doesn't win the veto, which means that yourself and Paris stay up on the block, you still have a bit of an angle. So I'm curious, from your perspective at this point, what was your angle? Because for me, I was looking at it and I was like, well, maybe she can put an angle that, like, you know what, you're not necessarily going to get too many votes in jury with the amount of comps that you've won and the amount of times that your name has been nominated. Did you ever think to, like, paint yourself in that? Obviously, anybody can win at any time, but did you ever think to paint yourself as sort of the quote-unquote GOAT that you could be taken to the end?
Yes, I should have painted it a bit more strongly, but I just knew that it probably would have rang hollow because I had been pretty straightforward and like factual in my game talk with Derek, especially because I knew it really came down to Derek and Kayla wanting to keep me because they were going to tell Will what to do. So when I spoke to Derek, I knew based on history that Final Four HOH is generally the go into the war room or the throne room and like buzz in. I know that, but I was like, I don't know if they do, so let me try to twist this another way. And we've also had so many mental competitions and a relatively random sequence of competitions. If I can talk them into the idea of it being potentially physical or endurance, which we've been pretty much lacking at that point in the season, that's the GOAT factor. Like, you can beat me there, you can this and this. And even though I understand Paris is a social threat and that might not be a priority like a mental threat, consider the following. Like, I've been crappy and you've done better than me in these things, so maybe I'm the GOAT that you want to bring. So it was kind of like, that was like the secondary aspect. But, I mean, we know it didn't work. Everyone's like, you laid down and died. And I'm like, oh, I hate that it came across that way. Not really, but there's only so much room for manipulation in Final Five. You've spent that many days together, right? So
yeah, and
can't throw Paris under the bus without throwing yourself under the bus either.
It doesn't. Honestly, I think people get mistaken with the fact that when they talk about campaigning, they think like you should be talking nonstop, 24/7. Like, please do this, please do this, please do this. That there's just only so much you can say before you're just like running into a wall sometimes, and then there's only
as
like
Liv would say,
so many different angles.
Tacky.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a time and a place. People got on me about that with when I was up against Cassandra too, and I was like, I gave my pitches, I tried to give the best angle I could. They didn't go for it. There's not really too much else to go off of besides that.
There's no reason to be woke. There's no reason.
No,
like,
exactly. And quite frankly, sometimes scrambling and being over aggressive can be really harmful and really detrimental if you're doing it too much, especially if there's with people who kind of like have faith in you and were like had your back. If you're like questioning that and campaigning simply because you think, well, I got a campaign, well, that could turn them off. So there's always like a flip side to everything like that. So so you're evicted unanimously that week. You seem to have a little bit of disdain for Kayla before you left as well. A little bit more so than anyone. Talk about that.
Translated as disdain. I would think I was just like surprised and a little like I had a bad taste about it, but I think disdain is too far. Like, I respected how she had gotten herself to her point in the game for sure. I just think that I was so surprised to hear that that's how she saw everything, because to me, it takes a village to win Big Brother. Like, what do you mean? I don't know. I was surprised to hear it that way. Maybe I'll watch the game over, and when I'm privy to more information, I might feel like it was warranted, but I just couldn't. I was like, girl, you got to credit other people, man. Like, you can't say you did all this by yourself. So I was shocked to hear it.
So how much then was your sort of the way you got evicted and left? How much, because you were in there for a really long time, so you had a pretty good read on everybody that was left in the game that they have played. So when you make it deep in the game like that, I don't know necessarily how much the jury deliberation and the speeches and stuff, I want to say they play a factor a little bit, but for myself, I was kind of leaning towards one way or the other, and there wasn't much time to like sway my vote personally. Was your vote live when it was heading into Paris versus Kayla, or was your mind fairly made up? And did the way you left affect your vote at all?
So this is the fun part of these podcasts, because this is when I give the answer that is true and everyone loses it because they don't believe me. So just get ready for that one. It'll be fun. Everyone goes, Paris weaponized Maddy into the jury and sent her with an agenda. Yes, but not to the extent that I think it seems. Of course, one of the tragic parts, I don't know if you feel the same way, is I wish there was a little bit more camera time in the jury house because it's such an important factor in the game that is not overlooked but just not focused on. And people consider their knowledge of what's happened in the house as the same as our own knowledge, when in fact that's not the case at all. Right. So I speak to Kayla and Derek and Paris and Will prior to leaving the house. And Paris says, do this and do this for me. And I said, maybe the things that she was saying about her game, I agreed with, and I thought were talking points. So I voiced those things in the house, and I understood that the jury would see me coming into the jury going, Paris, 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 as an agenda. So I didn't think it would even be useful for me to do that. So maybe that is how it came across. And of course, you're still kind of in Big Brother mode. I was more interested in voicing to everybody in the jury, hey, especially Allie and Liv, who I had then understood were working closely with Kayla. Girls, just so you know, Kayla thinks that she had you under her thumb this entire time and that she was in charge of you guys. You should know that, because if you're going to pick her for $100,000, you should be aware of how she perceives your role in her game. And I don't think that she sees it the way that she should. But that's, again, my extra week in the house coming in. So the fact that it probably does look like I went in rah-rah Paris, especially with my reaction at finale. That was because one of my best friends was about to win $100K, and I was pumped. I was like, good for you. I applaud a defensive game so much because it's so, in my opinion, so rare and so difficult to win defensively. Yeah. And I mean, she clutched the final 4 HOH and of course won the last one. So to me, that evened out the competition win factor against Kayla. Yeah. And then I just feel like she had a good perception of how other people had played into her game. Now I hear a little bit more about Faith. Now I hear about other things. But sitting there in the finals, my mind was not necessarily, I will vote for Paris no matter what. And this is, again, where everyone says I'm a liar. You know how it is when you are planning your jury questions and your walk-up statement to the voting box. Yep. And this is edging the line of talking about production, but I'm gonna go there. Okay. I was supposed to have an idea of what I would say depending on who I was voting for. But I made it very clear that regardless of who it was that I was going to choose, I would say that I was voting with my head and not my heart, because in the end, that's what it was going to be. Should Paris if she could not articulate her game the way that she did, if she hadn't acknowledged the factors that I felt were pivotal, if she hadn't taken herself to Final 2, if she had been the GOAT, if she hadn't literally dragged her way towards the end when she really needed to, I would not have voted for her to win. And I know that is a big, oh, yeah, right, like you were so excited. Damn right, I was excited. This girl pulled it out. Like, hello. So, yeah, so that I would have, honestly, I was impressed with all final 3 games. They were all sensational players, so I was prepared to vote for any of them to win.
So does that mean then if Paris hadn't won that final HOH, had it been either Kayla or Derek had won it and they had cut their showmats and Paris is sitting there, does that change your vote at all, or does your vote still let's say hypothetically one of the showmats cuts each other, Paris still gives the same answers, same questions, just sitting beside them in a different situation where she doesn't win her way to the end, she gets taken by either Derek or Kayla. Does that change your vote at all, or is it basically the same?
I think potentially it would change it. It's hard to say again because it didn't happen. Right. I feel like that changes the whole spectrum of the speeches. That changes the whole attitude of the jury. That changes potentially the question we're asking the jury members. Like, it would have completely changed the tone of everything, right? So it's like, I can't say for sure. I mean, I was damn happy to see her in that final 2, but I voted for her based on what had happened in the game and how the speeches went. So should there have been a different circumstance, that would have changed the factors that I based my vote off of. So anything could have been possible in that scenario for sure.
Final question for you. Having spent all that time in the house, having tried out so many times, is there one sort of takeaway for you from such an amazing experience, preferably a positive one. I know there's like so many different takeaways you can get from an experience like this, but if there's one sort of thing you take away in a positive sense, what would it be?
There's hundreds of positives. It's hard to choose one. I think just cumulatively Big Brother and the concept of a social experiment that in so many ways is so twisted and so taxing and all of those things. It is the most beautiful thing to me. I think it's incredible. I'm so much more obsessed with it coming out the other side of it than I have been ever as a viewer. Everything, the sequester, the competitions, the day-to-day, the Maddie, please go to the diary room, all of that stuff. I can't believe I existed in that universe, and it's not real anymore, and it's not something to spend my day-to-day dwelling over. It's something that I can reflect on as a completely unique and incomparable to anything experience, and it's just, I cannot believe I got to play this game that I love so much. It's just so amazing.
Well, Maddie, it was such an amazing time chatting with you. It was such a pleasure to hear your perspective on the game. For people who want to, plug time for you, for people who want to check out what is going on with Maddy Poplett, how can they do so?
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, so my favorite avenue so far for communicating has been Instagram. I really am a sharing type of person, talkative, love to show what I'm doing both with Big Brother factors and without. And I am hoping for some fun plans this summer and hoping to, keep it interesting. So I'd recommend Instagram. I believe it's MadPopBBCan6 that they can follow. Twitter is where I like to show my sense of humor. Twitter is a crazy place. That's a world out there. So if you would like to get to know me outside of crying, outside of the stress of the Big Brother game, and actually get to know the full spectrum of my personality, Twitter is the place to do that. And I love interacting with people. It's really cool. Like, I see you're doing it all the time. It's interesting to get to be part of the community from a past player's perspective, because believe it, I was on there beforehand too. So Twitter, you know what? Oh my God, I can't even remember my friggin' handle. I'm pretty sure it's MaddyBBCan6.
Yes. So we'll figure it out. I'll post it on here eventually. People will get it. So if you guys if you guys liked this podcast, feel free to give it a thumbs up in the section below. Feel free to comment, suggestions, always welcome, of course. My thanks to everybody for listening to this, and stay tuned, because I will have the one of the, either the ding dongs, both of them, or one of the two, either the ding or the dong, depending. I don't know which one is
whichever.
I don't know which one is which. We'll figure it out. But I am hoping to. I will have potentially Liv on Thursday. If not, I've got Ali confirmed for Friday. So anyway, stay tuned for that, guys.
People
you can follow all.
Them. They're so funny.
You can follow all of the details on my Twitter handle, which is @JoelBBCan or JoelBBCan4 on Instagram. I'll give you guys all the details on that. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys again soon. Toodles!
Thanks, Joel.